In the early hours of November 5, 1979, Charlotte County Sheriff's Deputy John J. Greer radioed dispatch with an urgent report. He claimed to have discovered a murder at the farm store in Punta Gorda, Florida. The victim, 25-year-old Adele Marie Easterly, an assistant manager working the night shift, had been brutally killed, shot once in the back and once in the head with a 12-gauge shotgun. Roughly $7.34 was missing from the register, suggesting a robbery gone wrong, at least on the surface. But while the case would quickly go cold, some officers couldn't shake a nagging suspicion. Something about Greer didn't sit right. He was a fellow deputy, yet there was something off. Odd, even creepy, according to Detective Mike Gandy of the Cold Case Unit. As years passed and leads grew colder, whispers about Greer lingered, but no arrests were made. With no physical evidence or eyewitnesses, investigators were left chasing shadows. And while Easterly's family waited for justice, Greer remained a free man, seemingly untouched by the horror surrounding him. But Adele Easterly's murder wasn't the only suspicious tragedy orbiting Greer. Just 2 months before her death, on August 27, 1979, Greer had called in another shocking report. This time, it was personal. He claimed his wife, Jackie Greer, had taken her own life. According to his story, he'd been asleep when he heard a pop, discovered smoke near the closet, and found Jackie dead from a gunshot wound. The death was ruled a suicide, but something didn't add up. Years later, during re-examination, forensic inconsistencies were discovered. Though suspicions loomed, investigators were unable to conclusively tie Greer to the scene. He walked away unscathed. Again. Then came another suspicious incident. On October 3, 1980, just days after a female friend of his was found dead from an apparent overdose with pill bottles and a suicide note left behind, Greer abruptly resigned from the sheriff's office. The woman's husband later told deputies that Greer had been following her and had tried to initiate a sexual relationship with her. The case, like the others, stalled due to lack of hard evidence. Greer vanished from public scrutiny, finding work at other police and sheriff's departments across Florida, and later shifting into aviation. He was everywhere, yet nowhere. Despite his resignation and the trail of dead women behind him, Greer managed to evade justice for decades. The case files gathered dust until 2016, when a flicker of hope emerged. The Charlotte County Cold Case Unit released a public statement, subtly alluding to a law enforcement officer being involved in Easterly's death. It was a calculated risk, a bated breath, hoping someone, anyone, would come forward. And someone did. In 2019, a former teenage dispatcher came forward with a harrowing account. She had worked at the sheriff's office in 1979, the same year Greer prowled its halls. She accused Greer of sexually assaulting her during that time. But her testimony didn't end there. She also recalled him returning to the office the night of Easterly's murder, appearing disheveled, one glove missing, something red, possibly blood, smeared on his hand. He carried what appeared to be a long gun. Then, in a chilling twist, she claimed he had threatened her, saying, "Ask Adele Easterly what happens when they say no to me." That haunting line stayed with her for 40 years. Her testimony prompted investigators to reassemble the pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle. More witnesses emerged. A friend of Easterly's came forward with critical information. Back in 1986, she had told police that Adele had been romantically involved with a married sheriff's deputy, who frequently visited her during night shifts. The deputy, she said, brought his service weapon with him, claiming to protect her. But Adele, she recalled, had been trying to end the relationship. She was definitely afraid of him. That deputy was John Greer. More dots connected. Greer had told this same friend that his wife tried to shoot herself after discovering he wanted a divorce, a claim eerily similar to the official story of Jackie Greer's death. And then came the revelation that the weapon used to kill Adele, a 12-gauge shotgun, matched the kind Greer routinely carried in his patrol vehicle. In April 2023, investigators finally tracked down Greer. He was bedridden, living in an extended care facility in Kingsport, Tennessee. His health had deteriorated so significantly that he could barely speak or feed himself. But when detectives confronted him, they were met with a quiet, chilling confession. He admitted to shooting both his wife, Jackie, and Adele Easterly all those years ago. Though the confession offered long-awaited answers, justice remained elusive. Due to his medical condition, Greer was never arrested. Detectives knew that extraditing him to Florida would be near impossible, and the lack of physical evidence meant a trial would have been a gamble. He died on March 2, 2024, at the age of 77. For Adele's family, the revelation was bittersweet. Jessica Kilborn, Adele's niece, who was only 5 when her aunt was murdered, said, "We have a name, but it will never be closure. It's not, because I don't have my aunt here. My dad doesn't have his only sibling. My grandparents never lived long enough to even see this moment." Detective Gandy echoed her grief. "It's very disappointing that we didn't get to arrest him and have him stand trial," he said. "But it's also good to be able to close the case and give the family some answers. I'm sorry we couldn't have done more." As the news became public, Charlotte County Sheriff Bill Prummel issued a strong statement. "I want to be clear that this individual does not represent the overwhelmingly great men and women who have worked for this agency over our century-plus of existence. I am angry at the scar he has left on our reputation. But I am even more upset about the people he hurt through his vile actions." The sheriff's office continues to investigate whether Greer could be connected to other crimes. During his post-law enforcement years, he held various aviation-related positions and remained active in small communities across Tennessee and Florida, places where oversight was thin and predatory behavior could slip through the cracks. The story of John J. Greer is one that echoes beyond a single case. It's a chilling example of how the uniform can sometimes shield the very evil it's meant to fight, and a haunting reminder that justice delayed can feel like justice denied. Yet even after 4 decades, Adele Easterly's name is no longer buried under silence. Her story has been unearthed, her voice heard, and her killer finally unmasked. The night of February 1st, 1986, was supposed to be a moment of celebration. 2 best friends, Michelle Xavier and Jennifer Dewey, had just graduated from high school and were looking forward to the future. On this particular evening, they stopped at a 7-Eleven in Fremont, California, to pick up drinks before heading to a birthday party. But for Michelle and Jennifer, this innocent moment would be their last. As they left the store, they were approached by a man who would take their lives in a brutal and senseless act of violence. That man was David Emery Mish, a man with a long history of violence and crime that stretched back to his teenage years. Mish, who had already built a reputation for his erratic and dangerous behavior, saw the 2 women as easy prey. David Mish was no stranger to violent crime. Born on February 19, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois, he had a troubled childhood marked by severe abuse from his alcoholic father. By the time Mish moved to Santa Clara, California, his anger and resentment had festered, and he was already engaging in petty crimes. However, it wasn't until 1977 that his life would take a dark turn. With his first known violent crime, Mish broke into a neighbor's house and raped a house cleaner at knife point. He attempted to strangle her but was interrupted when she fought back. This was just the beginning of a pattern of violence that would continue to spiral out of control. After being arrested for the assault, Mish was sent to a psychiatric hospital. But his release in 1981 didn't mark the end of his violent tendencies. Just a year later, in 1982, Mish attempted to abduct an 18-year-old woman in Oakland Hills. The crime was thwarted when the woman fought back, but Mish's behavior only escalated from there. Despite multiple arrests, Mish continued to evade serious consequences, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. On that fateful night in 1986, Michelle and Jennifer never had a chance. After they left the 7-Eleven, they were abducted by Mish, who had been lurking in the area. He forced them into his car, and the nightmare began. Mish drove them to a secluded spot off Mill Creek Road in Fremont. There, he would commit unspeakable acts of violence. Jennifer Dewey was stabbed multiple times, while Michelle Xavier was shot in the head. The brutality of the crime was shocking, and the loss of 2 young lives sent waves of grief through the community. Mish, already a known criminal, had no remorse. He stole Michelle's car, a 1984 Pontiac Sunbird, and abandoned it a few miles away from the scene. The bodies were discovered the next day, but investigators were left with few clues. Despite their best efforts, the case would go cold for years, with no leads and no suspects. But David Mish's story didn't end there. His violent crimes continued to haunt the justice system. In 1989, he brutally murdered 36-year-old Margaret Ball, a woman he had known in passing. The crime was chillingly similar to the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. A senseless act of violence fueled by anger and a complete lack of regard for human life. Mish was arrested and convicted for the murder of Margaret Ball, but the authorities had no idea just how far his reach extended. It wasn't until years later, in 2003, when DNA evidence linked Mish to the murders of Michelle Xavier and Jennifer Dewey. The breakthrough came when Mish's DNA was compared to evidence collected from the crime scenes. The results were conclusive. Mish was responsible for the deaths of the two women. But even as the truth began to emerge, Mish continued to deny his involvement, offering a bizarre and contradictory version of events. He claimed that he had been a bystander who had tried to intervene when two men abducted the women, but his story was clearly fabricated. David Mish's criminal history was not just limited to the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. In addition to his violent sexual assaults and robberies, Mish was connected to the 1988 disappearance of 9-year-old Michaela Garrett. Michaela was abducted from the parking lot of a Rainbow Market in Hayward, California, and despite numerous suspects, the case went cold for years. However, in 2017, DNA evidence once again pointed to Mish as a potential suspect in Michaela's abduction. His palm print and thumbprint were found on Michaela's scooter, and his presence in the area at the time of her disappearance placed him in close proximity to the scene. Still, Michaela's body has never been found, and Mish continues to deny any involvement in her kidnapping, even as the evidence continues to mount against him. Mish's ability to evade justice for so long was a result of both luck and the inability of law enforcement to connect the dots. His DNA was not on file, and his criminal history did not immediately point to the double murder of Michelle and Jennifer. But as forensic technology advanced, the truth began to unravel. Mish's connection to the murders of Michelle and Jennifer was solidified by the DNA evidence recovered from the crime scenes. And with the evidence against him mounting, Mish was eventually charged with the murders. In 2024, after years of legal battles, David Mish finally faced justice for the murders of Michelle Xavier and Jennifer Dewey. The trial was a long-awaited moment for the families of the victims, who had spent nearly 4 decades waiting for closure. The prosecution presented a compelling case, with DNA evidence, witness testimony, and Mish's disturbing history of violence. Despite his attempts to deny his involvement, the jury found him guilty of both murders. Mish was convicted of first-degree murder for both the 1986 murders of Michelle Xavier and Jennifer Dewey. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of Abduction, 25 years to life. On December 19, 2024, this sentencing made him eligible for parole after serving 50 years, although he had already been sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of Margaret Ball in 1990. However, the conviction was bittersweet for the families of Michelle and Jennifer. While they had finally seen justice, the case of Michaela Garrett remained unsolved. Mish continued to deny any role in her abduction, but the mounting evidence seemed to suggest otherwise. His involvement in the disappearance of Michaela, along with his other crimes, painted a chilling picture of a man who had spent his life inflicting harm on others without remorse. David Mish's story is a stark reminder of the lengths to which some individuals will go to inflict pain and suffering. His violent crimes, spanning decades, are a testament to the darkness that can reside within a person. From the murder of Michelle Xavier and Jennifer Dewey, to his connection to Michaela Garrett's disappearance, Mish's legacy is one of destruction and tragedy. As the families of his victims continue to seek closure, they are left with the haunting knowledge that their loved ones were just 2 of the many lives that were torn apart by a man who could have been stopped long before his killing spree reached its tragic conclusion. Mish's trial may have brought justice to Michelle and Jennifer's families, but for many, the shadow of his crimes will never fully fade. The tragic murder of 65-year-old Marjgery Colette in 1999 initiated a complex and prolonged quest for justice, spanning over 2 decades and involving multiple jurisdictions. This comprehensive account delves into the intricate details of the case, highlighting the challenges faced by law enforcement, the resilience of Colette's family, and the eventual apprehension and sentencing of the perpetrator. Marjgery Colette was a beloved resident of Chicago's Edison Park neighborhood. After dedicating 35 years to Walgreens, She had recently retired, looking forward to a peaceful life enriched by community activities and time with her family. Known for her warm demeanor and generosity, Colette was an integral part of her community, often participating in local events and volunteering her time to help others. Her sudden and violent death on May 21, 1999, left the community in shock and mourning. On May 21, 1999, Colette's niece discovered her lifeless body in her bed. The scene was particularly gruesome. Colette had been smothered with a pillow, and her small dog was found with its throat slit. The brutality of the crime suggested a personal motive, leading investigators to scrutinize individuals who had recent access to her home. In the days leading up to her death, Colette had hired Jerome Lawrence and another man for remodeling work on her house. This connection immediately placed them under suspicion. Neighbors reported seeing the men at her residence, and their knowledge of the home's layout and Colette's living situation made them prime suspects. Jerome Lawrence, born in 1969, had a criminal record that included charges of burglary and robbery in Cook County, Illinois. His troubled past and familiarity with the criminal justice system painted a picture of a man accustomed to operating outside the law. Associates described him as charismatic, yet manipulative, capable of gaining trust while harboring ulterior motives. Shortly after Colette's murder, Lawrence's actions raised further suspicion. He stole his wife's car and contacted her from various locations, including Arkansas and Georgia, seeking assistance. Alarmed by his behavior and aware of the investigation, his wife alerted the Chicago Police Department. Approximately 4 days after the murder, authorities located Lawrence in a jail in Moran, Arkansas. He had been arrested on charges of theft by receiving and was also wanted in Illinois for parole violations. During questioning, officers discovered Colette's belongings in his possession, strengthening the case against him. However, in a daring move, Lawrence managed to escape from the Arkansas detention facility by crawling through the ceiling and walking out undetected. This escape marked the fifth such incident from the relatively new jail, highlighting significant security lapses. Following his escape, Jerome Lawrence effectively disappeared from law enforcement's radar. He resurfaced in Florida, adopting the alias Joseph Mehar. Under this new identity, he was arrested multiple times on various charges, including fleeing and eluding in 1999, robbery in 2000, and arson in 2005. Despite these encounters with the law, Florida authorities failed to connect him to the nationwide manhunt for Colette's murder. This oversight was partly due to administrative errors, including the issuance of a second FBI number, which prevented the linking of his fingerprints to the outstanding Illinois warrant. During this period, Lawrence managed to build a semblance of a new life. He formed relationships and integrated into communities, all while maintaining his false identity. His ability to evade capture for 16 years speaks to both his cunning and the systemic failures that allowed him to slip through the cracks. In February 2015, a significant breakthrough occurred. Willie Britton, Lawrence's stepson, was walking in Chicago's Budlong Woods neighborhood when he spotted a familiar figure. Despite the passage of time, Willie immediately recognized his stepfather. Overcoming his initial shock, he contacted the police, providing them with Lawrence's true identity and informing them of the outstanding murder warrant. When officers arrived, Lawrence presented a Florida Department of Corrections ID under the name Joseph Mehar. Initially hesitant, the police conducted a fingerprint analysis, which confirmed his true identity. After 16 years on the run, Jerome Lawrence was finally back in custody. Following his arrest, Lawrence was extradited to Illinois to face charges related to Colette's murder. Prosecutors highlighted his extensive criminal history, emphasizing the brutality of the crime and his subsequent years as a fugitive. On February 4, 2025, nearly a decade after his rearrest, the now 55-year-old Lawrence pleaded guilty to 1 count of home invasion causing injury. The court sentenced him to 17 years in prison, with the requirement that he serve at least 85% of the term. He received credit for the 3,434 days, approximately 9.5 years, he had already served since his 2015 arrest. For Colette's family, the sentencing brought a mix of relief and lingering sorrow. Her niece, Judy Beats, who had lived in fear following Lawrence's escape due to his threats against the family, expressed gratitude that justice had finally been served. "It's been a long and painful journey," she said. "We can now find some peace knowing he's behind bars." The Edison Park community, which had been deeply affected by Colette's death, also found solace in the resolution of the case. Neighbors remembered her fondly and hoped that the conclusion of the legal proceedings would allow her memory to be honored without the shadow of unresolved justice. The Marjgery Colette case underscores several critical issues within the criminal justice system, including the challenges of interjurisdictional communication, the importance of accurate record-keeping, and the need for robust security measures in detention facilities. Lawrence's ability to evade capture for over a decade highlights vulnerabilities that, if addressed, could prevent similar cases in the future. Moreover, the case serves as a testament to the resilience and determination of victims' families. Despite years of uncertainty and fear, Marjgery's loved ones remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice, demonstrating the enduring impact of violent crime on those left behind. The 26-year journey from Marjgery's tragic death to the sentencing of her murderer reflects the complexities and challenges inherent in the pursuit of justice. While no legal outcome can undo the pain and loss experienced by her family and community, the resolution of the case offers a measure of closure and a reaffirmation of the commitment to holding perpetrators accountable, regardless of the time elapsed.